In February of 2013, a solo traveling young woman disappeared from her hotel in Los Angeles. 2.5 weeks later, guests at the hotel started complaining about the water pressure in their rooms. Some guests were complaining that the water was running black, and others complained that it had an unusual smell and taste. But what they didn't know was that this water was contaminated with the decomposing body of the girl who disappeared. Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, please do subscribe, and if you're old here, hello again. My name's Philpott and I cover true crime cases on my channel. Today we're diving into a very famous case which is very interesting and very freaky. Freaky is probably the best way to describe it. None of the theories or explanations are without flaw, and I just know that your head is going to spin when we get into some of these rabbit holes. Also, just so you know, I am going to try out something new with my videos. I'm aware that some people love the longer content and are more than happy to spend like an hour watching a YouTube video. Other people might not have that time to watch YouTube, and that's absolutely fine. So in order for people not to miss out, I am going to be uploading a shorter summary version as well alongside this longer in-depth version. So the shorter versions will be approximately 10 minutes long and they'll just touch on all the most important details, but these longer videos will be like rabbit hole central. I don't know about you, but I personally love going down the rabbit holes. But yeah, I'm just gonna try out something new, see how that goes. If people enjoy the summary versions, then fantastic. And yeah, also a quick little disclaimer before I get into it. If any of the information I provide in this video is inaccurate, I do apologize. It's just what I found online and merged into one video. Okay, let's dive in. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old student from Vancouver, Canada. She decided that over her winter break she was going to go on a trip. So she would travel up the west coast of California, starting in San Diego, working up the coast and finishing in San Francisco. Because she was a woman traveling alone, she called her parents every single day on her travels, just so that they knew she was okay and everything. As well as that, Elisa had her own blog which she updated regularly as well, and it was mainly about fashion and beauty, but it did also touch on darker topics like mental health, because she did struggle with her own mental health. She had bipolar disorder, which obviously comes with very high highs and very low lows, and she was very open about it. She would talk about it on her blog in sometimes a jokey way, other times in a more self-depreciating way, and actually soon before she died she wrote a passage about death. She said, "Fear of death is very silly to me. I am reassured that death is something that all things before me and all things after me will go through. When it comes, I will know what it is. I just hope for a chance to say my goodbyes. I am more scared of going before my time without having lived a full and meaningful life." For her to talk about death in that way is almost a little chilling considering what ended up being her fate. But let's get into when Elisa got to LA. So she arrived in LA on the 26th of January 2013. Obviously she was on a student budget, so she found herself a nice little budget hotel that was obviously reasonably priced. I say nice, it wasn't the nicest. We'll get into that a bit later. This hotel was the Stay on Main Hotel, which had previously been known as the Cecil Hotel, or Cecil. And because it was reasonably priced, it isn't all that surprising that it wasn't in the nicest of areas. It was in Skid Row, which is notorious for its thousands of homeless people and for being an epicenter of criminal and drug activity. So initially Elisa had been staying in a dorm room, sharing with other strangers. And I say initially because a few days after that she had been asked to move to a private room because these roommates that she had were complaining about her odd behavior. The details of this odd behavior aren't known exactly, but it's definitely interesting considering what came next. On the 31st of January, Elisa visited a bookstore, and this would end up being the last place she was seen alive in person. She'd spoken to the manager there, and the manager said she seemed to be in good spirits. She'd actually been looking for gifts for her family to bring home with her, but that evening Elisa's parents didn't hear from her, and because they'd been hearing from her every single day at this point, they instantly started panicking when they couldn't get a hold of her. So they contacted the LAPD and she was reported missing. From here, the investigation began. Authorities conducted a huge amount of searches in the hotel. They checked the lobby, the roof, they checked almost everywhere. And they conducted a good few interviews as well. And her parents actually flew to LA from Vancouver to aid with the search. What's really unusual though and quite chilling is the fact that Elisa's blog continued to update for days after she vanished. So Because of this, there were a good few people who thought she was still alive somewhere. But 2 weeks after she disappeared, some very strange CCTV footage surfaced. If you've heard of this case at all, you probably know about this footage, and it is it's so strange. Let's just get into it. It had been uploaded online and obviously it went totally viral, which I'm honestly not surprised about. So first off, we see Elisa walking into the elevator, and straight away she starts pushing buttons. Not just one button, but honestly most of the buttons. She steps back into the corner and waits for the doors to close, but they don't close. So she walks up to the doors quite cautiously and slowly, and then really quick steps 1 foot out of the lift and looks right and left, and then she steps back in, backs against the wall, and then backs into the corner as if she's hiding from someone or something. She waits there for a few seconds and still the doors don't close. She walks to the doorway of the lift and stands there before stepping out into the hallway again, slower this time, and then she jumps out of the lift with both feet, almost as if she's trying to give someone a fright. She steps side to side, steps back into the lift, back out into the hallway, to the point where she's almost fully out of the view of the camera. And then she just stands out there, and eventually she throws her arms up in the air. She does stand there for a few seconds without moving anymore, so I've cut a bit of the waiting time out, but know that the doors still remained open this whole time. Then she walks back into the lift with both her hands up. Again, she starts pressing loads of buttons. In fact, this time it looks like she presses all of the buttons. And this is when things get kind of creepy. She steps out of the lift again and she starts gesturing. And at one point she turns enough towards the camera that it looks to me like she's got a massive smile on her face. She does this unusual motion with her hands, with her fingers spread really far apart. It kind of looks like she could be talking to someone. Then she moves her hands in a way that it looks like she's counting. Like, you know when you're listing things out loud and it's like, oh, this one and that one and this one, like that kind of motion. Then she walks totally out of view and that's it. The lift doors don't shut until she's been gone for like a whole minute. And that footage is the last proof of Elisa ever being alive. Now, experts have looked into this footage and some suggest that she was interacting with another person in a playful or maybe even a suggestive kind of way. So it's possible that there was someone there just outside of the shot. Other people have analysed her hand gestures and they claim that, well, she must have been double jointed and was like trying to crack her joints to relieve pressure. But also in the video, initially you might think she's wearing a skirt, but it actually turns out that she's wearing what looks like men's gym shorts. So maybe Elisa had been with a man before this. Obviously we don't really know, but I mean, stranger things have happened, I'm sure, when a young single woman is traveling alone. Like, you know, it might be kind of, why not? But, oh, here we go. One of the major theories about what's going on in the lift is that Elisa was playing the Korean elevator game. I'm smiling because I'm honestly afraid to talk about this. This is basically an urban legend kind of ritual that is designed to open up a portal and bring you to another dimension. The only requirement to play the game is that you're in a building with an elevator and at least 10 floors. And the Cecil Hotel had 14 floors, I believe. Now, let's get into the instructions of the game. And I'm gonna be totally honest, even though I've heard about this part of this case before, while I was doing my research for this case, it really did give me chills. I just find it so creepy. So hopefully I get through this. Honestly, if any markers fall or birds flap at the window, I'm leaving the country. Okay, let's get into it. First of all, it only works if you play the game alone. So if anyone tries to get into the lift with you, you have to wait for the next lift. When you get in the lift, push the button for the 4th floor. When you get to the 4th floor and the door is open, stay inside the lift. And press the button for the 2nd level, go there, then the 6th, go there, and then back to the 2nd and go there. Obviously this whole time you have to stay inside the lift. Then you hit the button for the 10th floor. At this stage you have to be extra vigilant because a lot of people report hearing a disembodied voice calling their name. And it is very important that you do not reply. From here you go to the 5th floor, and this is where it gets exceptionally creepy because a woman will enter. She might show up as a total stranger, but she might show up as someone you actually know. But the most important thing here is that you do not acknowledge her. Don't talk to her, don't even look at her, because if you do, she might follow you home. and she will try and trick you and talk to you, but do not reply. After the woman joins you, press the button for the first floor. And if you're playing the game right, the elevator will take you to the 10th floor. That's when the doors open, leading you to another dimension. In this dimension, no electronics will work, including your phone. And this place looks a lot like our dimension, but it's colder and it's darker. And some say that the air is quite heavy there and it's kind of hard to breathe. When you get there, you'll see a glowing red cross in the distance, and that's how you know that you've gone to this other dimension. But the instructions are very clear that if you see anything other than this red cross, get back in the elevator. Some players have said that at this point they pass out and they wake up either back at home or what seems like home, and some say they just arrive back on the 10th floor. To leave this dimension, you have to go back into the same elevator that you got there in, otherwise you could get stranded there forever. So I took to Reddit and I wanted to see what some people had experienced when they tried out this elevator game, and I thought you guys would find this interesting too. So I found some pretty spooky stuff. And if this isn't your type of thing, then I'll put a timestamp below so you can skip past it. But for the rest of you, I think I'm more afraid to talk about this bit than the instructions. This is like, why do I put myself through this? Okay, let's go. So one girl that tried this out, Michaela, couldn't believe when a woman actually did walk into the lift on the 5th floor. She described her from her peripheral vision as this halo of dark energy. Michaela completed the ritual, and when she got out at the 10th floor, the woman said to her, "Where are you going, Michaela?" Obviously she ignored it and moved on, but when she walked away down the corridor, she noticed that all the doors in this place were rusted shut, like they hadn't been opened for years. And then they started rattling and banging. At the end of Michaela's post about her experience, she says in capitals, "Make it stop, make it stop. I feel like something's going to jump me. I feel like there's someone in my house, even though I'm alone. Stop, stop, stop." Another person claimed that the woman that entered on the 5th floor was really tall, like over 6 foot, and she was in a white dress and she was barefoot. While this person was trying to ignore the woman stepped beside her and basically was leaning over her and said, "I'm sorry, my love, did you say something?" Obviously the player didn't respond, but the woman stayed, hovered over her until she got out at the 10th floor. Another anonymous player said that the woman that got in was petite with green eyes, freckles, and blonde hair. Now, that amount of detail tells me that this person got a really good look at this woman when you're not even supposed to look at her at all. The woman turned to the player and said that she had just witnessed an accident and that they needed to go back to the 5th floor to help. The player ignored her for as long as they could, but then the woman got aggressive and started screaming at the player. She was cursing and trying to get this person's attention, and eventually she stopped, but that's when she began weeping, which honestly I find even creepier. And eventually the woman attacked her. When the doors finally opened in the lobby, the woman stepped in the way of the door, blocked the exit so that the player couldn't leave, and she had this snide grin on her face, looking the player directly in the eyes. For days and even weeks later, this player claimed to see this woman in her daily life, outside her apartment. Too much for me. But all in all, most people who have played this game warn not to play it. It's some pretty intense stuff. Anyway, is this what Elisa was doing? Maybe her hand gestures were her gesturing to this creepy elevator woman. Maybe that's who she was hiding from. Maybe she experienced something paranormal and was pressing all the buttons in the lift so that she could escape. And maybe that's why the elevator doors didn't close the whole time, because the elevator woman was there, but you know, we just couldn't see it through CCTV. All in all, I find this stuff so interesting to think about, but this definitely isn't a flawless theory. For starters, I mean, obviously there's no proof that this is even a real game, that any of these things have even happened. And alongside this, Elisa spoke English and Cantonese, and up until her death the instructions for the game were only in Korean. They hadn't been translated over to English or Cantonese, so how could she know how to play unless someone had heard about it and told her? But then she'd have to have someone who spoke Korean as a friend, or I don't know, but it just makes it that little bit less believable. Also, just on the topic of the CCTV footage in general, it is believed that the footage was manipulated and that an entire minute of footage was removed. The time is weirdly encrypted where you can hardly make most of it out, and in some versions of the clip the timestamp skips several seconds, so it's believed that the video has been slowed down in order to accommodate for this lost minute of time. And some people say that the fact that it's slowed down is what makes her gestures and everything look so strange. I'm not sure how much I believe that, because I'm going to show you it sped up now so you can be the judge of that yourself. And honestly, maybe in some parts that does make sense, but in other parts she just moves so fast that I'm like, how can that be natural? Like when she puts her foot out and looks left and right, like why would you move that fast? Like it's a little far-fetched for me, just that one bit. But anyway, you be the judge of that. Even let me know down below what you think about that. But if someone had edited this, they definitely went to a lot of effort. So first of all, who would do this? And second of all, why? It's possible that they wanted Elisa to seem disorientated and on drugs or something to distract from what was really going on. And what you believe that to be is up to you. We'll definitely get into some theories in a little bit. Okay, so back to what we know to be true. We left off at a point where Elisa was still missing, but this strange elevator footage had been released. Well, not long after this footage came out, I think just a number of days, there was a major update in the case. It was the 19th of February, and by now, there were a lot of guests complaining about the water in the hotel. Some said the pressure was low, others said the water was running black for a few seconds and then running clear, others said it smelled strange and tasted disgusting. So you probably know where this is going. A maintenance worker called Santiago Lopez went up to the roof to check that everything was all good with the hotel's 4 water tanks. He got closer to the tanks, and when he looked into one of them, he noticed that Elisa's naked, decomposing and bloated body was floating in this tank, and it was covered in a sand-like substance, and the clothes that she'd been wearing in the elevator were floating beside her. So yes, the reason the water people were showering in and drinking in this hotel was black was because the decomposing body of Elisa Lam was in one of the hotel's water tanks. That is probably one of the most disturbing facts in any true crime case I think I've ever heard. So of course an autopsy was carried out because, like, how is this girl even here? How did she get up to the roof? How did she get in the tank? Why is she dead at all? How did she die? There were a lot of questions, and strangely enough, the official ruling of the case was that Elisa died from accidental drowning. And this was because there had been some water in her lungs. Obviously that wouldn't show up in an autopsy, so it doesn't necessarily mean that foul play was not what happened, but there's just no evidence of it. Although there had been a lot of speculation, particularly due to the CCTV footage and her odd behaviour, there were no drugs in her system. There was only the tiniest amount of alcohol, so that kind of ruled out any theories about hallucinogens or intoxication. But the official ruling of the case that this had been an accidental drowning really did not sit well with people. So a hotel employee came forward to say just how difficult it would be to access the roof, and more so even the tank itself. So there were only 4 ways to get up to the roof. So you have 3 fire escapes and 1 door that was from like the inside of the building. But that door, you needed a staff key card to get through it without setting off an alarm. And there was no CCTV that showed Elisa walking towards that door. So that kind of tells me that it kind of seems like she got up there through a fire escape. Although if CCTV is being manipulated, then who knows, that may or may not be the case. So from here you'd have to climb up a ladder to get to the tank platform, and from there you'd have to squeeze through plumbing equipment and climb the 10-foot tall tank. Finally, after opening the very heavy metal lid, you'd have to jump inside the water tank, knowing that there was no way to get out, because at the time Elisa was found, that water tank was between half and 3/4 full, so you wouldn't be able to reach up and pull yourself out. So I'm sorry, how is this accidental? How do you do this accidentally? She or someone else would have had to go to a lot of effort to get her up to the roof and into the water tank. So accident, I don't know. But what definitely needs to be mentioned here is it it actually wasn't impossible for someone to have gotten up to the roof through that door that we spoke about without a staff keycard, because less than a month after her body was found, a Chinese YouTuber was staying in the hotel and he tried to get up to the roof through that door, and he did it. He didn't need a keycard, he didn't set off any alarm, he didn't even call any attention to himself from any of the employees. So this whole thing is pretty concerning, considering it was less than a month after she had died, and obviously security wasn't increased or anything to get up there. Also, the sand-like substance that surrounded her body in the tank is believed to have been the gravel from the roof of the hotel. So Elisa would have had to remove all her clothes, throw them on the ground, maybe rub them around in the gravel, pick them back up, throw them into the water tank, and then fall in. So I don't know about you, but I do struggle to believe that that could possibly be an accident. So let's say she didn't fall in. Did Elisa take her own life? Was she murdered? Or was she possessed? So let's look at the suicide theory for a sec. First off, we do know that Elisa struggled with her mental health. And with her bipolar disorder, yes, this means very high highs and very low lows, but it's also possible that she suffered from some hallucinations or delusions, because that can happen when you're in one of those extreme mood phases. And maybe that's what caused her unusual behavior in the elevator and in that shared room before she was asked to leave. But I don't know, even still, that doesn't quite sit well with me, because yeah, you might be behaving oddly, but why move your hands in those ways? Like, the way she was moving, just, I don't know if that would cause that. I mean, I genuinely don't know. And Elisa's family claim that she never expressed any suicidal ideation before. But with that said, there was some pretty intense stuff in her blog post. So I guess determining that either way for a fact is probably a pretty difficult thing to do. But suicide by drowning, whew, that's pretty rough. Like, as far as I'm aware, that's almost an impossible feat. I can't even imagine how awful that would be. I'm starting to feel a little claustrophobic just even thinking about it. And I honestly just feel like, okay, if she had made it to the roof and she wanted to take her own life, would it not make more sense to jump off the building? And also, why bother buying souvenirs for your family if you're gonna just take your own life? She was worried about the size and weight of the souvenirs she was gonna bring back on her travels. But what we do know is that she was on 4 medications, and 2 of those medications, an antipsychotic and a mood stabilizer, she hadn't taken the day she died. And apparently without these to balance the effects of the antidepressants, there is an increased risk of manic episodes in a bipolar person, and that then can lead to paranoia, lack of insight, delusions, hallucinations, and so on. So maybe this would cause her to act strangely, but then would it really push her that far as to take her own life? Potentially, but maybe not. I certainly would have stipulations about that still. Finally, there's the possibility that Elisa was still so disorientated and disturbed from playing the Korean elevator game, or she was being possessed or haunted by something, and that drew her to take her own life. But again though, why the water tank? Why take all your clothes off? Why put all your clothes in the tank as well? It still feels like there's something missing here. Either way, police did rule out suicide because of the lack of evidence. Okay, the next theory we absolutely have to look at is foul play. There are several prongs to this one theory, so I'm gonna try my best not to confuse you. But let's start off with a mysterious lover boy theory. As we saw in the elevator footage, Elisa was wearing what looked like men's gym shorts. So this could very well be something that you throw on after spending a night with a man. You know, like I said before, stranger things have happened. She was an attractive, young, single woman on an adventure up the west coast of California. Like, who's to say that couldn't happen? And obviously, if she had been seeing a guy, nobody's come forward to say that they were with her. And if that is the case, then that's pretty sketchy. But then it's also just sheer lack of evidence. But again, if this was the case, maybe this person turned on her, or they had lured her in some way and wanted to murder her. But it does make a little bit more sense when you think about the drowning part. It's a lot more plausible to me to think that maybe someone held her underwater and that's why she drowned. as opposed to her inflicting that upon herself. Maybe she'd even been drugged and then dumped into the water tank and she drowned because she wasn't even conscious. But again, the coroner didn't test for rohypnol. Also, what I haven't even mentioned yet is there was another CCTV clip that surfaced soon after, and this showed Elisa walking into the hotel lobby with two men, and they gave her a box. She took the box and left, and they left the hotel. So did these two men have something to do with her death? She didn't know anyone there. So what was this arrangement? Also, there was a bunch of people who had been staying on the 4th floor, the same floor as Elisa, when she disappeared, and these people were never interviewed. Like, there could easily have been a murderer among them, and they would have just walked free because they were never interviewed. For that reason, and for a couple of other reasons, a lot of people kind of talk negatively about the police investigation. I'm not going to get into those details because there's just so many other details to get into, but that is another thing that potentially could have stopped this case from properly being solved. Like, technically, yeah, it's a closed case, but not many people really agree with the conclusion. So one of the other prongs in the foul play theory is an invisibility cloak. I know you're probably thinking, what? So let's get into that. My voice really said no. The month before Elisa's tragic death, she had tweeted out a link to an article that basically was about this invisibility cloak kind of technology, and the caption of the tweet was, "Canadian company invents invisibility cloak." So some people believe that the person she was interacting with in the elevator was wearing an invisibility cloak. Apparently you can see some kind of fuzzy movement in the footage or some kind of shadow, but honestly, to me it just looks like poor quality CCTV footage. It doesn't really seem like that to me, but then I'm no genius, I don't know. Definitely let me know what you think about that in the comments. But there is the possibility that maybe Elisa knew too much about this technology, and if she did, was she killed to stop her going public? The interesting thing about this theory is there was actually a visual effects company that was registered on Google Maps to the hotel's address, Hotel Cecil Hotel. This company was called the Invisible Light Agency. And while this theory could explain who she was gesturing to in the elevator footage, and could also explain why the elevator's doors never shut because someone was blocking the sensors, but Elisa's tweet about the technology could have just been because she saw this article and found it interesting because she was really interested in Harry Potter. She loved Harry Potter, and obviously there is invisibility technology in Harry Potter. So it could just be that simple. Alright, another prong of the foul play theory is tuberculosis. Again, you're probably like, what? Well, something very strange happened only 3 days after the discovery of Elisa's body. There had been a rare outbreak of tuberculosis in Skid Row. It was the largest outbreak in over 10 years, and 4,650 of the homeless population in Skid Row got this disease. So, okay, what does this have to do with Elisa's death? Well, some people believe that Big Pharma or some kind of secret government agency infected Elisa with tuberculosis on purpose as part of a biological experiment. Now, okay, why in the world would they do this? It may have been a plot to increase sales of the tuberculosis test kits. This is feeling worryingly similar to COVID conspiracies right now, but that's a that's a topic for another day. But essentially this theory suggests that Elisa's body could have been used to infect thousands of people with tuberculosis because it can be spread through water. And where was her body found? In a water tank. And one of the most efficient ways to cultivate pathogens of TB is to keep them where they're not exposed to the elements. So sunlight, wind, that kind of thing. So that would be pretty perfect in a hotel water tank. I have a feeling a lot of people are rolling their eyes right now, but honestly, I'm sorry for laughing. I'm like nervous laughing because this next bit kind of freaks me out. The official name of one of the TB test kits was called Lam Elisa. So that in itself is weird, very specific name. And the test itself was created in none other than the University of British Columbia, where Elisa was studying. That's honestly so freaky to me. Like, what are the chances? Like, this is in LA. But what this doesn't explain is Elisa's strange behaviour. So let's look at the symptoms of TB. So the usual symptoms are coughing, chills, fatigue, loss of appetite. But if it infects the brain, it can lead to psychosis and therefore hallucinations and delusions. So that definitely could explain her odd behaviour. However, okay, this theory is not without flaws. The only thing about this is the Lam Elisa kit was created in the University of British Columbia before Elisa even started studying there. Also, Lam is short for a compound that's produced by the TB bacteria, and Elisa is an acronym for the enzyme that's used to detect that compound. So that pretty much tells you a lot about that. There were also no sign of the disease in her system, but what I'll say about that is because she was in a water tank, it may not have been detectable anymore by the time they found her and by the time they carried out an autopsy. So it's definitely not black and white, but it's just one of the most bizarre coincidences, like a 1 in a billion coincidence as well. Okay, the final prong of the foul play theory is that this was some kind of cover-up, at least a hotel cover-up or a police cover-up. Like I said, there is a lot of argument that the police investigation was pretty crappy. Then there's also the fact that the elevator footage was tampered with. So did hotel staff tamper with it to protect one of their employees? Because something I will say is they did have a history of employing sexual predators by accident. Maybe they were protecting one of their own, or maybe police were protecting either someone influential or a police informant or one of their own. Since a whole minute was removed from the elevator footage, this could easily be just removing someone walking past or removing the few frames that someone was visible in. Something that I think is very possible is maybe Elisa got to the roof with the help of a hotel employee. Like, that would definitely explain why no alarm went off. Someone who knows the hotel inside and out. It's just a thought. And honestly, I don't have answers when it comes to this theory. I just think it's something that is important to put out there. And if you guys have anything else to say about that, I would love to know. And there are even more theories that I'm not going to fully get into, but I will mention so that you guys can explore those rabbit holes. But some people believe that there was a cult based out of the Cecil Hotel, and others believe that there was some soldier that she had met in San Diego that lured her in some way. Maybe he had something to do with the invisibility technology. There was a lot of like intermingling of theories with that one. But yeah, there's just so much to this case, it's almost unbelievable. Okay, so something you absolutely have to know is about the hotel itself and its history. So I'm gonna go through these real quick. The Cecil does have this air of darkness over it for fascinating reasons, and I'm telling you, you are gonna recognize some of these names, I promise. So the hotel was built in 1924. In 1931, they had their first completed suicide. There had been a number of attempted ones before that, but 1931 was the first completed suicide. In 1944, a woman had been struggling with a lot of pains in her stomach. Turns out she was actually pregnant and she didn't know it. And not only was she pregnant, but she was in labor. But this woman had a lover who was twice her age, and I'm pretty sure back in 1944 that would be definitely frowned upon, because I'm not sure if that guy was married or whatever, but she gave birth to this newborn baby boy, and she believed that this baby was a stillborn, so she threw it out the window and went back to bed. When the baby was found though, their investigations found that the baby was not born stillborn. It had been born alive because there was air in its lungs. So this woman killed the baby for no reason. Well, not no reason, but like not exactly ideal. Definitely not ideal, Jesus, sorry. I'm losing all sense of reality. There were also a number of murders in this hotel. This included a woman called Goldie Olson, who was found stabbed, strangled, and raped in her room. Now, many of you may know the name Elizabeth Short, and if that's kind of ringing a bell, you might know her more as the Black Dahlia. Well, in 1947, she had been drinking in the Hotel Cecil's bar. The following day, she was found a few blocks away, bisected at the waist, with a morbid, everlasting smile, cut into her face from ear to ear, and her death remains unsolved to this day. If you don't know that story and the details of it, oh, I have covered that whole case in detail, so I'm going to link that up the top, so definitely give that one a watch after this. Alright, moving on to 1962. A woman jumped from the 9th story window, and not only did she die, but she landed on a passerby and he died too. Now, you know who else stayed at the Cecil? And this has definitely been quite a topical name of late. Richard Ramirez, the Night Stalker. In fact, he lived in the Cecil Hotel during one of his murder sprees. He would literally go out, commit his crimes, and return back to the hotel. There are rumors that he even carried out some of his satanic rituals on the roof, but I don't believe he killed anyone that was staying in the hotel. Good for him. And he wasn't even the only serial killer that stayed in the Cecil Hotel during a murder spree, which is insane. And that's just a small amount of the madness that occurred in this one building. All of this darkness is encapsulated into this one building. So because of all this darkness, some people say that this hotel is controlled by some kind of dark entity. Whether or not you want to believe that is up to you, but that's just letting you know, just in case you want to stay in Skid Row at any point. Oh, and also several sex offenders actually checked into the hotel during Elisa Lam's stay there, which is also kind of worrying. Okay, so while I was looking at the history of the hotel, I thought, it would be so interesting to look at real life recent reviews from people who have actually stayed in the Cecil Hotel, or the Stay on Main Hotel. I'm using Cecil because that's what most people know it as. Now, this review is from just 2 weeks ago. Pretty cool hotel. Had a weird dude follow me through the hotel into the elevator. Got to my room and the water tasted hella sus. Looked like a black with some cherry flavouring or some type of red substance. Other than that, the place was pretty damn cool. So that's just one of them. Now, a lot of people actually did say this about the water being kind of black and having a cherry flavouring, but then there were also a ton of reviews that were saying, ignore these people, they're making sick, disgusting jokes. The water is clear, the water is fine. If people are saying those kind of things as a joke, that's seriously messed up. So in general, some said the hotel was absolutely fine. Other people said it wasn't so fine. Some said that it had a weird smell. Some said that they heard weird noises at night or even voices. But I mean, how do we know that these voices aren't from like living people? Like, I'm all for the theories and all, but let's not rule that out. Like, the Cecil Hotel has 700 rooms. There are probably people walking around at all hours. So all of this brings me to the final theory of what happened to Elisa Lam, and that's in relation to the crime rate in the surrounding areas. So Skid Row has a crime rate that is 3 times higher than the national average for America. There are a lot of sexual assaults, murders, and just violence in general, even in relation to LA's statistics. So Skid Row statistics are higher than LA's statistics as a whole. So maybe this was simply a case of a young girl traveling through a dodgy area, staying in a sketchy hotel surrounded by sketchy people, and she was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The only thing that bothers me about that is still her strange behavior. Like, was it just a coincidence that she'd maybe had some kind of psychotic break and then was murdered by a stranger? Maybe. The truth is, I don't know. And last but not least, there are a lot of synchronicities in this case. Very unusual things. I find this so interesting, but the bookstore that we mentioned before, the last time any human saw her in person alive, it was called The Last Bookstore. It was the last time she was seen alive, and it was called The Last Bookstore. That in itself, kind of creepy. But not only that, the store's registrant address is a PO box in British Columbia in Canada, where Elisa was from, even though the store was in LA. And the postcode of that address doesn't match the actual address. The postcode, this is insane, the postcode matches the address of the Forest Lawn Funeral Home, where, would you believe it, Elisa's funeral was held. Chills. How does that happen by accident? How did any of this case happen by accident? Like, how did she end up on the roof, in the water tank? How were her clothes beside her? Like, how is it? I don't know. It's such a bizarre case. And honestly, after going into all of the theories and all of the everything, this case is just so inconclusive. Yes, the official ruling of the case is still that it was an accidental drowning, but that doesn't quite sit well with me. What do you think though? Do you think that, yeah, that could easily have happened? If so, how do you explain that? How do you explain how it happened as an accident? Like, I would honestly love to know what you think. Either way, that brings me to the end of this case. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like and comment down below what your thoughts were, because my head hurts. Also, since there were a lot of different parts to this video, feel free to go over to the summary version so you can just get like all of the main bits, and then you can kind of make your decision from there. If you want to check that one out, it's linked below. So my TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter are katephilpott_YT, and I need a nap after that. So good night, and I will see you next week. Bye guys.